is so glad you're here to join us. Oh, hi, Dan. Nice to see you down there. We are so glad that everyone is here, and I hope that you had an amazing educational session with Ray. I'm sure there were some hot takes that you can chat about later, so make sure to connect with them on LinkedIn or in a group room on the virtual lobby. We are so glad that you are joining us now for our keynote speaker, Lilah Jones. She is here, and I couldn't be more excited. One of my favorite parts about XDay is that it gives us an opportunity to bring in not only inspiring speakers, but tactical speakers, people who can give you real world, like, action items to go forth and be better researchers and better people. So she has a huge background going now working as head of corporate sales at Google, but previously at Oracle and of Microsoft, and an adjunct professor at Suffolk University. I found this all on the internet. And we are just so excited for her to be here and share with us her framework for getting to the yes. So please give a virtual welcome to Lilah Jones.
Hooray! What a wonderful introduction. Thank you, everyone, for giving me a little bit of your time. I promise to make this next hour completely worth it. What you're going to take away from this talk is a couple of tips that can help you be more effective as you start to make different business cases to get change made. And you'll also hopefully have a little bit of fun. So today we're going to talk about getting to yes. Wouldn't that be great if we could get to yes in everything? Like, how do we get to yes? As someone who's been in the field of persuasion for most of her life, I'm excited to share this topic with you today. So let's get started. So, Lilah Jones, this is who I am. This is my slide to share with you. I highly encourage you to put a slide like this together for yourself in this virtual world. It's a wonderful way to connect with your teams. That's a sidebar. Lilah Jones, I am so excited because I'm often compared to what I call the superhero that I'm the most like, and that is Moon Girl. If you are a Marvel fan at all, you'll know who Moon Girl is. If you're not a Marvel fan, totally fine. She is known for solving big challenges with her mind. She always gets some new and exciting way to save the world by using either little things that she tinkers with and comes together with a solution, or just using her smarts. And that is what I like to be known for. You see me in different venues here. I get a chance to lead a team that really brings the best of Google to what they do. And so it's so much fun to be able to share some of the things I've learned along the way with all of you today. So I love data. Don't you? I absolutely love data. And if you're like, I love data too, but I don't know how much I love data, just let me ask you this. How many of you have a tracking device for fitness, for sleep? I will tell you, I love data so much that I have this, which is my Fitbit, that I'm constantly like logging food into and looking at my steps and wondering about how many hours I'm moving. And I also have what I call my Oura Ring. It's OURA. And this is something that just tracks my sleep, lets me know, how well did I sleep? What was my heart rate? What time did my heart rate drop? All of these different things, all of this stuff, all of these things that I have. So every morning I feel like I check my own personal dashboard of health and fitness. That's how much I love data. So I wonder how many of you love data. If you love data, go ahead and put a thumbs up in the chat because we would love to see that. And it's interesting because today we're going to talk about, why does that data matter? Think about maybe if you're old enough to remember 10 years ago, before all these tracking devices were out, very rarely would you even have these data points. And if someone gave them to you, they may or not be impactful because they would not have changed your behavior necessarily. Now we have it and we've got all this information, and hopefully it changes our behavior. So it matters because it changes our behavior. And that's something I want you to keep in mind as we're having this talk. And also keep in mind as you're making different and having different points of view in meetings that you're having or projects that you have, is, will this change behavior? Because typically at the core of all data and data points is change. So I love data. I'm sure that you love data. Hopefully you're not as crazy about it as I am with all these trackers, but if you do, welcome. And I wonder who's in the audience. Some of you might be data analysts. Some of you might be HR people, or perhaps you're one of my favorites, which is research and academics. I get a chance to lead so many wonderful conversations in some of the business schools here in Chicago, which is where I hail from, and also in Boston. And it's so much fun to look at how research can impact making a case and then presenting it as a possible solution. I always like to call myself a problem solver, but if you think about it, all of us are problem solvers to some extent. Some of us are super jazzed when we're solving a problem. Others of us are less jazzed about it, but ultimately that is what we're doing. We're solving a problem and we're using data to do that. Or you might be a person who is in service or in LOBs, what we call line of business, right? So you're collecting customer sentiment. You're finding out how well did people interact with perhaps a new chatbot that you have on your website, or how well did people interact with your customer service center, right? Because customers are at the core of everything that we do. If you're in one of these areas, please take a moment, give me a thumbs up so that I know who all's in the chat. My guess is that there's going to be a lot of you who are in research and academics. That's awesome. Perhaps some of you who are all about people and managing people. Well, all of you are welcome. And again, we're going to talk about how we use all these different sources of data, right, to be able to tell our story and get to yes. So you have the data. It makes total sense. You've spent your time finding the right population sample. You've spent your time thinking about what should these questions be that we ask them. You've spent your time designing a really great survey that is so intuitive that it's like you're talking to a best friend when you're filling it out, versus one of those surveys where it's just so long and it's like next page and you're like, I'm not going to finish the survey. It's too long, right? You've done a really good job at putting all these things together, which is a lot of work. Then you gather those pieces of data, right? And now you're looking for what trends do we see? And you're making assumptions based on these trends. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, I think I've found a way to be able to really show and visualize how are people feeling coming out of COVID? How are people feeling about how much interaction they're getting and how much the company cares about them as they start to return to office? How many of us have had some of these return to office conversations where we're trying to find out how do we serve the audiences that we need to with different programs and benefits as they come back to the office? I know one of the conversations I'm often involved in, because I do work with a lot of women in our employee resource groups, is, how do we have things like childcare and how do we have things like flexible leave in order to enable people who do have a lot of responsibilities, women and men, to come back to work in a way that enables them to do their best work and they're not feeling like they're distracted or randomized during the day trying to manage family and work. So maybe you've gone through all of the effort to be able to get some of these insights back. And now you're wondering, okay, A, what assumptions can we make from this data? And then B, who do we need to share this with to get the change that we seek? That might be one of you out there or two of you out there. Or some of you might be saying, hey, we're looking at all of these trends in either user data, or we're looking at these trends in market data, or we're looking at these trends in sales data. I always feel like sales data is the most telling, right? It's very black and white, either it's selling or it's not. But then what about all of the other things that are around that environment of either marketing and engagement or digital engagement that really impact those sales? So again, you've got these data points. Now what? You take them to your line of business stakeholder, or you take them to your boss, or you take them to your board, and they say, I don't get it. I just don't get it. It's such a frustrating thing. And oftentimes we're like, how can you not see this? Are you blind? What is going on? Why are you not getting this? Because we're so close to it. Remember, we found the population that we wanted to survey and engage. We created the survey and got people engaged that way. We gathered the data and made some assumptions. And now we are giving the best representation of that. And it should be so obvious what to do next, shouldn't it? It's so obvious because it's kind of like our baby. But the person that wasn't involved in that process is like, I don't get it. Or what's even worse is they may or may not trust in the data that you put together. That's a very frustrating thing because you feel like I can't impact it. You might also be frustrated because you're thinking, I just spent like 6 months or a year putting this together. This is one of the things that I get a lot of personal value from my role in as an analyst or as a people leader or as a person who's in customer service and trying to impact some of the systems there, or as a researcher. And you're saying, I've put a lot of time into this. And if I'm going to put all this time into these types of projects, if no change comes from it, then what impact am I having? And that might lead to some dissatisfaction. I've been in that situation many times before, but not on the side from a researcher. I've been on that side with my customers. Oftentimes, I'm working with customers who want to transform something. They're coming and saying, hey, we really are noticing a lot of new market entrants in our area. And they may be faster because perhaps they are what some people call a digital native, kind of born in the cloud. That means they don't have a lot of on-site infrastructure, so they can make changes really quickly, either to software or to systems or to processes. Whereas companies have been around for a longer time might have a hard time rolling out a new product or may have a hard time rolling out a new solution. And so they say, how do we start to transform that? And usually I'm working with a trailblazer, somebody who comes into a company and says, I am here to enable change. And some of you guys might be like, we've got somebody in our company like that, and they're driving me crazy. Sorry, they probably talked to us first. Joking. But they might be saying, hey, we want to make this change. How do we go about it? And so one of the things I've had a great opportunity to do in my career is helping people make a business case. How do you make a business case? How do you get stakeholders aligned? How do you ensure that we're delivering something that, if we do a good job in delivering it, or if we find the right data points, they will support and champion our ideas? And so that's a very, very common thing across all industries and across all roles. Being able to get your ideas accepted and rolled out is a wonderful thing to add to your resume and your experience. So another reason why this is a challenge, 41% of companies struggle to turn data into decisions. 50% of all the data they have available is typically used to inform decisions. So only half the information that's available actually matters for them to make a decision. And then once they have that, only about 41% of companies actually feel good, or only 41% of companies actually understand that, hey, this is still a struggle to turn this into decision making. People have a hard time taking raw data and being able to say, I'm going to make a decision on it. And you know what? So do you. We have all stepped on the scale during COVID, and we saw a number that we couldn't believe. We were like, wait, what? How is this possible? Yeah, all of those, that commuting to work and walking from the train or whatever it is that you do, all of that mattered. And all of a sudden we were stuck in our houses, a little too close to the kitchen, stressed out with family, kids running everywhere. And I don't know about you, but I may or may not have had 1 or 2 drinks too much. All of us have stepped on the scale. We've all seen a number and we've all been like, oh, that's only because I'm wearing a jacket. Or, oh, that's only because I'm weighing myself in the afternoon. Or, we've all done it. We justify the number, or we justify the data point, and we don't make change. And so I want us to have a level of empathy for those that we are trying to sell our point of view to, or to get our point of view across to, when they don't accept the data points and the outcomes and the assumptions that you've put together. Give them grace. We've all done it. Now, I know that some of you are chuckling right now. You're like, was Lilah in my bathroom? Does she know she's spying on me? Because it's a very, very universal thing. And what's interesting is if we continue to go down this path, we can also see that whole idea of culture and being an organization that's decisions based on data, or data-driven, having a data-driven culture, is something that everybody strives to be, but it's very, very challenging. And when we peel the onion on that to see, why is that? Why is it so hard? It should be so obvious. A lot of times, and especially in the line of businesses that I've been in the technology industry for a long time. A lot of people like to say, well, it's the tools, right? We don't have the right tools. We need a new tool, or, it should be in there. Where's the easy button? Or there should be a workflow that solves this for us. There's other people who are like, oh, no, it's all the processes. If we could just design a workflow that enables people to sign off on I'm going to stop. How many of us have ever had a situation where somebody redesigned like our sales solution, or they redesigned your expense solution, and all of a sudden you can't get anything done because there's an approval at every single step, and you're just like, I get that we're trying to put controls in place. I get that there's governance, but this is not user-friendly. I'll pause. Many of us have experienced that. That's when we try to overlay process on something and over-process it, and it's like, hashtag over-engineered, not really working, not user-friendly. And as you can see on this slide, typically that data-driven culture is 63% the people. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to CEOs who've said, my number one challenge in getting my agenda off the ground, even CEOs have to get their agenda off the ground, is people. Either I don't have the talent in order to build what I need in order to run faster, or I've got the talent and I can't keep them focused on that. Or there's all these different things, but typically it's got to do with people buying into a vision. People buying into a vision. So how do we start to chip away at that? It certainly doesn't come overnight. And it's not going to come from just having one great project proposal that's based on data. This is a longer discussion and a different talk, but that whole idea of becoming a data-driven culture is something that I'd like you to ask yourself. Is the organization that I work in data-driven? Hopefully they are. If they aren't, and you're a data analyst or you're somebody who's trying to get something done, that might also be a flag for something new in 2022. I don't know. But those are things that we also want to consider, because again, if you don't have the people who are aligned with a strategy of leading with data, it's going to be pretty tough to get your ideas across the line. The other reason why sometimes we struggle, besides people and not being a data-driven culture, everybody's like, I'm hungry. It's lunchtime in Central Standard Time. How does she know this? The other thing that we struggle with is we fact people to death. Oh my goodness, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations. And just so you know, I'm guilty. I've done this too. You show up, you've got your data points, you've got your point of view, you've got everything you need, and you share all the facts. But facts tell, stories sell, or persuade, or enable people, or inspire people to make a change. How do we know this to be true? Well, you see this, I don't know if this is a Big Mac or what, but it's kind of making me hungry too. And I don't even eat meat. And that's so, maybe it's an Impossible Burger. It's probably an Impossible Burger. We see this hamburger here, right? Now, think about all the commercials that you've seen for hamburgers. They very rarely tell you how many calories are in it. What do they say? And I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but there's a jingle that will never go outside of my head that I remember from when I was younger. And it was, I'm going to sing it for you. Big Mac, filet of fish, quarter pounder French fry, icy Coke, thick shake sundaes, and apple pies. Some of you are old enough to remember that jingle, but you know which chain I'm talking about. Think of all the things that they do to get you to come to their restaurants. And it works. We'll drive through in a heartbeat and eat it like nothing. Nobody ever says, come and eat this 740 calorie burger. No one ever says that. Oh, by the way, when you add fries and a big giant Pepsi, it's probably about 1,200 calories in one meal. Nobody ever says that, because if they did, you'd be like, oh, no, I couldn't possibly, right? So facts tell, stories sell. I'll give you another example. When you were little, what did your parents do at bedtime? Did they come back to your bed or come to your bed and say, let me tell you all the facts of this story, or let me tell you all the facts of my day? No, they read you bedtime stories, not bedtime facts. So we are, as a culture, designed to enjoy stories. What are movies? Stories. What is that Netflix binge, latest binge that you've been watching? A story, and you can't turn it off, even though it is 1 a.m. You have got to be to work at 8. You've got a million things to do, but you just have to look at one more episode. That's because it's a good story. Now I ask you, when was the last time you told a good story? How good are you at telling a story? How often does your data and your data-driven projects and your data-driven proposals tell a story? Does that story resonate with the person you're telling it to? And if you told you that story, would you be inspired? These are really great questions to ask. Sometimes it's also really good to get feedback from other people, right? Like, let me tell you this story. And if they're like, I don't get it, that lets you know that it could be better. The data is important, but so is the story of the data. The data is a guide, lets us know where there's opportunities, where there's holes, and it gives us some kind of a map as to how we can manage a possible solution. But the story is the gas in the car. Can you imagine having a map? For those of you who are old enough, remember before we had Google Maps? Who remembers a small company that no longer exists called Rand McNally, right? Remember trying to fold the map and you'd be like, I can't fold it. Think about trying to get to a destination with no gas. Well, having a data-driven proposal or trying to make your point with data without having a story to go along with it is like thinking you are going to make it from one destination to another on a map without any gas. So make sure you stop and gas up your car. Remember, stories are remembered 22 times more than facts alone. Think about the fact that I remember the McDonald's jingle, right? Think about old sitcoms that you may have looked at or seen, and you still remember it, right? You still remember those jingles, or even a song in the car. Back when people actually listened to the radio and there wasn't Spotify, you'd hear a song like, I don't actually like that song, but it's on. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're jingling, you're singing it, and you just can't stop, right? Think about Christmas time, which will be there very, very soon. Those blasted Christmas jingles just get in your head, and you just all of a sudden feel in the spirit, right? We don't have to have any prompts for that. It happens automatically because it's anchored to a story that we continually tell ourselves, right? And so all of a sudden we hear that jingle and we're anchored back to that story. What story is your proposal or your change idea? What story is it anchored to? What emotion does it elicit? People don't make logical decisions. People make emotional decisions. People don't make logical decisions. People make emotional decisions. Most times that's the case. Those emotions are typically story-driven. So I hope you're hearing the point here. That idea of having a strong story that elicits emotion, engages the person who we're seeking to persuade is very, very important because people don't remember the facts. They couldn't tell. You know how I know too? We can't even remember what we did last week. Think about how busy our lives are. People say, what'd you do last Monday? Or, hey, we did this a month ago. You'd be like, I don't even remember what day it is today, right? But man, oh man, you can certainly remember the, jingle to perhaps some song you heard last week, but you can't remember exactly what you did that day. So that's another indicator of, again, just the idea of how well we remember stories. So I know you're all like, Lilah, I get it already. I got to have a good story, but I'm not good at telling stories. And I say, I challenge you on that. All of us know how to tell a story. If you can read a story, you can tell a story. Your delivery may not be super smooth, but you can tell a story. And you know what? That is a skill that you can build on. That is something that you can learn. Can you imagine being a really good analyst or being a really good researcher or being really good at getting survey information and data, being able to look for opportunities in that, and then coming with an outcome, and then putting on top of that the layer of a strong story? You will be unstoppable. You will be unstoppable. Hashtag, I am ready for a raise, and this is my fee. That is a very rare combination of skills to get in one person. So something to consider after this is figuring out where can I go, what can I do to improve my storytelling. But for now, let me give you a snapshot of what is good data storytelling. First off, there's context, right? There's context for going after these data points or this particular change, proposal, etc. Then there's a narrative. What is your data narrative? What is it that you're trying to say? You might compare that to a foreword in a book, right? How many of us go to, if you still go to the library, I'm a huge fan of the library. I often wonder, like, why do people spend so much money on Amazon on books when you can literally just go to the library and check it out? So maybe you're in the library or wherever else you'd like to look at books, and you're looking at the foreword and you're trying to think, should I read this book? I don't know. Let me look at the foreword. That might be your narrative. Visual design is in there as the last step. And look at data is number 3. It's not number 1. Why? Because data for the sake of data doesn't matter. Remember, I started off talking about a Fitbit, right? Think about if somebody would have come to you 10 years ago and said, hey, listen, by the way, this is how many steps you took. You'd be like, creepy, and why should I care? But when you connect that data to a fitness story or a lifestyle story or image, people are like, oh, yes, I must know my steps, right? That's the idea. Data is number 3. First off, what question are we asking and what are we seeking to solve, right? Then what is our narrative? What is our storyline? What's the arc of our story, which we'll talk about more in a second. Then what is the data we have to back that up? What data points do we have that support the context and narrative that we're going after? And then finally, what does the picture look like? What does your hamburger look like? Is it complicated? Are there lots of words? Is it obvious? Do people draw a natural conclusion from it? Or are they curious and like, I am not following you? Those are things you want to think of. So 6 steps to a killer story. And I put this in white because I want it to pop. The first thing is we want to listen, right? Who is it that we are seeking to serve by this story or this proposal or this project? How are they gold? I'm going to stop and say that again. How are they gold? When I say that, that means how are they incented, compensated? How do they know when they're doing a good job? I can't tell you how many times I've asked somebody, okay, I understand what you do. I understand your role. I understand the company you work for. How do you know when you're successful in your role? How are you gold? If a person can't answer that, I would pause on doing a project with them. That's just red flag, red flag. If they can answer that, it helps you to understand, okay, if you are gold on EBITDA or however you want to say it, then any information that I'm going to put together in a proposal or a project has to solve for one of the things in there, because that's what you care about. If you are gold on customer satisfaction index scores, everybody calls it something a little bit different. If you're gold on that, then whatever proposal I'm coming to with you has to be a part of that context. It has to make that better or improve it in some way. Otherwise, you're not going to be interested in my data, right? So starting that research off with, who is the stakeholder? Now, how do you know if you've got the right stakeholder? Well, the person that you are seeking to serve, maybe it's your boss, so you have no choice, but usually it's somebody more broad. Let's just say that your boss comes to you and says, hey, we're going to analyze this data set because we're looking to solve this problem, right? You can jump in and say, okay, let's get going. Or you can say, who are we looking to solve this for? Oh, we're looking to solve it for customer service because they are having, they're not sure why people are going to the website, but they're not engaging with the chat. Okay, so we're looking to serve for that. All right, who is impacted the most by that? Well, that would be Dawn in customer service. She's the director over there. All right, great. I want to talk to Dawn. Before I get started on this project, I need to get more context from Dawn. I can't tell you how many times that step is missed. So listening, who is it that this data serves? Who stands to gain the most if we solve for this? And if those, we always call it a qualifier. If you can't get the answers to that, perhaps prioritize another project if you can. So after we listen, we now know how they're gold. We now know that she wants to understand, why are people not engaging with the chat, even though they're coming to the website from the ad? Great, we've listened, we understand what they care about. Now, we've got data that we can get, and we may have already pulled. We want to refine that to say, okay, we've got all these things in this universe. What are the 4 points that are actually going to matter? What are the 4 points that are actually interesting and actionable? We always say find data points that take maybe a little bit of courage to implement, but have enough momentum to keep a person engaged and interested. Then what's that storyline or arc? What's a natural timeline for the data or the natural timeline for the story? Maybe that timeline might be somebody comes in through an ad or somebody is engaged and curious about XYZ, and then they start in this experience with your brand or experience with your product or experience with your organization. And they kind of go through this natural vignette of actions before they get to where you're solving for the problem. So you're looking for a natural storyline or an arc. If we were going to compare this to maybe a Disney show, right? It's always, there's somebody who's unsatisfied. There's always a villain. There's always somebody who's a savior, and then hopefully a happy ending at the end, right? What's funny is we are also impacted by that. Most of what we do is influenced by Disney movies, right? How many of us want to be a princess? Maybe that's no longer that common, but typically a lot of what we see is influenced by what we saw as children, right? We've designed our lives around those storylines and arcs. And we didn't know it. So we're going to be purposeful and design this project or our proposals around a storyline or arc that's sticky. Then we're going to have a draft design, right? Thinking of any kind of a visual or how do we make this cool? You know, if there's something that you're doing that's related to food, maybe you put your data in a hamburger format. If there's something that you're doing that's related to people, there's so many things out there that can help you make really, really cool visualizations. If you don't have it, invest in it, right? There's so many things that we can use now and tools that are available to help us take our data and turn it into something that's got a little bit of wow factor. And I know sometimes you're like, well, my data shouldn't need wow factor. It does. It does. Because you're not selling yourself. You're selling someone else on your point of view. And people like wow. They do. Now you got to have the data to back it up. But if you can have a little bit of wow factor, that's always helpful. And then, like I said earlier, get feedback before you present it to a board or before you present it to your boss or before you present it to your stakeholder. Get feedback from perhaps that person's right-hand man or lady, right? So we talked about going to Dawn in customer service to talk about her role and why she's having a challenge in getting conversions on the website. Maybe you talk to Dawn's second in command or somebody else in customer service, or even go so far as to talk to the customer service agents, sitting in and listening on one of their calls, try to figure out a couple different things as far as what that experience is like. Right? And then ask those people for feedback. If you want to take it even further, you might go over to sales and say, hey, listen, how do you feel leads are being passed over you from customer service? And they'll have a point of view. Ultimately, the more people you build in your stakeholder basket, the more support you get, because that doesn't just impact Dawn. What you'd find out is that Dawn's impacted by it, but so is Bob over in sales. You'd also find out that Dan down in logistics is impacted by it because of just the natural progression things go through as people interface with your brand. So can you imagine if you've got 2 or 3 line of business heads who you've interviewed, you've talked about some of their challenges, you've talked about how this one little thing can impact everything that they're doing. Can you imagine now you've gotten feedback, you've gotten the visuals, you've created a great storyline, you've got the right data points in there. Everybody says it makes sense. And now you're going to present it to actually get the change. Well, you're not going to be presenting that by yourself. Dawn's going to be on your side. Dan from logistics is going to be on your side. Bob from sales is going to be. All of these people are going to be like, we want this change. Now, would that be easier to get your point of view across and to get the change done and to get your project sponsored versus you just saying, hey, here's all these data points? Absolutely, because what you've done is you've used your social capital to build connections and bridges and gain consensus. Your data has to have consensus. If it doesn't, it's going to be awful tough. I can't tell you how many times we've taken very logical arguments where you're like, why wouldn't you do this? This is so obvious. Look at the dollars and cents. Look at the dollars and cents. And people are like, yeah, I get that, but no, we're just too busy right now. Or yeah, I get that, but I just don't want to disrupt the apple cart because I'm going to retire in 2 years and I just want to stay status quo. Well, gee, you could have told me that in step 1, right? When you were listening and finding out, does this make sense to continue to go do it? It's a go, no go, right? Should we go forward or should we not go forward? These are things to consider as you're qualifying which projects you actually spend time on trying to build actual change from. And then finally, share, right? I talked about that. Share your story, get your wow factor, enjoy it, and hopefully present it well and get the feedback that you want. So I ask you, are you aligned with your stakeholders? Do you know who they are? I love this quote. If you wish to persuade me, you must think my thoughts, feel my feelings, and speak my words. You need to bait the hook to suit the fish. Can you imagine going fishing with a marshmallow? Maybe you'll catch something, probably not. Probably just some kids that, are driving you crazy. I'm joking, of course. I have children, that's why I say that. But can you imagine? No, you would never do that. You'd be like, well, I'm not going to catch anything with that, right? Can you imagine pulling forth a proposal or making a change proposal and you don't know who the stakeholders are or if you're aligned with them? And I love this image because we have to be aligned and win hearts, minds, and hands. We win hearts by showing empathy. We win minds by showing that we care about them and our change is going to help them with their agenda. And we win hands by giving them a role in the change and giving them a role in what we're proposing, right? We want them to be hands-on. If you're leaving a meeting or a session and there's no action item that engages the stakeholder, it may or may not be as impactful. So think about, how is my storyline engaging hearts, minds, and hands? Because if your storyline is interesting and everybody says, you know what, that was good. Well, you're real good at putting together a data story. Wow, those are some really good data points. But you know what? There's no action that we can actually take from it. Then we always like to call that IBM. Interesting, but not meaningful. In order for it to be meaningful, you have to be able to take action on it. Oftentimes that comes up in my line of work where people want to tell a story about a new release that's not GA yet. And who knows when it's going to be GA? Why would you create a story around something somebody can't buy? If in fact, you're trying to sell them something, right? It's interesting, yeah, it solves a lot of problems, but it's not available. So they can't really take action on it. So it falls flat, right? So think about, how is my data story aligning with heart? That's my emotion, right? And make me, I feel good about it because it aligns to what I want. My mind, right? It's logical. It makes sense. I get it. It's going to help me with what I want to accomplish. And then I can actually take action on it. So to recap, data alone is not enough. Facts tell, stories sell. Facts tell, stories sell. Remember, appeal to emotion. We are emotional beings. We make decisions based on emotion, not just logic by itself. We make decisions based on emotion. We want to listen, align, and empathize with our audiences and whoever it is we're looking to serve. Why? Because that's our value prop for engaging. If I'm not going to listen to you or you're not going to listen to me, then should I sit still to be present for what you're going to present? A lot of times people will skip these steps because they don't feel like their people skills are good enough. Oftentimes people are like, I don't know. Or better yet, they feel like they're not good at speaking. Like, Lilah, I'm not very good at speaking in front of an audience, or I'm not very good at speaking up in meetings, or I'm not very good at speaking at the. Fix it. Get good at it. If you're serious about your career, there's so many resources out there that can enable you to learn how to use your voice. Oftentimes when I have talks like this and I ask people what is really the challenge, it's, funnily enough, not just the tools and data that we're talking about, as I talked about earlier, it's them and it's their comfort and them staying in their comfort zone. A lot of times people love to use the tech. Let me just create one better widget, because it keeps them from having to deal with the fact that their communication skills could be better. If that is an underlying root cause for you, fix it. It's holding you back. You have to use your voice. One small tip I'll give all of you is, if you're like, I don't know if I really use my voice, or I don't know what to do with that, or how do I make that real? One actionable thing that you can do right after this is ensure that in your next meeting, and I mean the one that you go to after this or the next one that you're in with your group, make sure you talk within the first 5 minutes. I don't care what the agenda is. And practice doing that. Have something to say in the first 5 minutes of a meeting so that you're not just there on mute and off camera. Try that. That's a great way to start practicing using your voice. And certainly that can snowball into you going into more advanced things like an improv class. If you ever want to learn how to be better at presenting and thinking on your feet, go to an improv class. You will have so much fun. And the tools that you get and the experience that you get from being able to take any topic and speak on it relatively quickly will pay dividends for your career and even for your interpersonal connections and personal relationships. So that's another thing that you can consider. And then finally, if you want to work on your voice and being able to present your ideas better, try to align your ideas with an area that you are innately passionate about. I'll give you an example. I am super passionate about women. So I try to figure out a way where I can engage women issues and things that will help us have a better experience for women in our organization with many other things that I do. I try to have some adjacent conversations so that I can take that passion and invoke it in different areas when we start talking about diversity and inclusion. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's playing the guitar. Maybe it's making your own beer. But you can talk about that and talk about that experience and overlay it onto whatever else you're doing so that you can have something that you're speaking confidently about. So those are sidebar topics, but they're very important. If you are in fact sitting there saying, how would I go about finding my voice so that I can even do any of this stuff? Those are some ideas. If you're like, nope, still not me, then partner with somebody who is good at it. Nobody said you had to do this by yourself. Collaborate and find somebody who's good at what you're not and go after it. Get your project taken care of. Get your project at the top of the list because that is resume building, right? That is something that you can say, hey, listen, I was able to do this. And it's so fulfilling to impact change with your ideas or with the research that you've actually done. That way you'll be able to engage head, heart, and hands. And that's a wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful feeling. I've seen it. I've experienced it. And it is, in fact, magical. So the 30-day challenge, because we got to have a challenge as I wrap up here and we go to our Q&A. My ask of you is in the next 30 days, isolate one data project that you can apply today's concepts towards. Again, I don't want you just to be entertained or like, oh, Lilah's good, or wow, that was nice. I want you to do something. That's the ROI from you deciding to engage for the last 40 minutes or so with me. Go and do something with it, right? So find a project that you can apply these concepts to in the next 30 days. Tell the story to a boss, a peer, or a stakeholder just for practice. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's like a part of the agenda for the organization or whatever. Just find anything that you can practice on, right? And then share that story. And then find an accountability partner in your organization who may be good at a part of it that you're not, right? That can help you accomplish the task. And the entire, you talk about driving culture, everybody will raise in their experience and their engagement with that project. Everybody's skills will get better. So it'll be totally worth it. And it'll be so much fun. Your timeline is 30 days or less. If you need help, if you're like, I don't know, this is getting too tough, the folks at Question Pro are good at this. They have people who can help you put together that data story. They have people who can help you design that survey, like it's talking to a best friend. They have people who excel when you excel. And they're rooting for you. They're just saying, why don't you call me? They have these resources available for you. Take advantage of it. That's my ask of you. 30 days. Let's go after it. I've so enjoyed sharing some of these concepts with you. I've so enjoyed being able to share my passion with you. And I hope that today you're taking away at least one or two things that can help you be the center of the change that your organization and your team will experience because of it. And that is my wrap.
Wow, Lilah, thank you so much. That was like inspiring. I was like writing down questions to ask you, and then you like answered all of them as you went. I was like, what about it if you're not comfortable? Oh, she's answering. What about, oh, she's answering it. And actually last year Dan featured a comfort challenge for all of us at Question Pro to kind of get us out of our comfort zones and to really like embrace change. And so that, I think, leads me to my one question. What's something you've done to just like get out of your comfort zone to become such the speaker we see today?
Oh, I love that you asked that because I actually have to, there's no magic here and there's no Calvary, right? I have to work on it all the time as well. There are some things I'm innately predisposed towards, because I come from a very large family. I'm the last of 11 children. So I heard a lot of stories in my household. I would just sit there on Friday night and just watch the world go by and be like, what is going to happen next? So that was certainly helpful. But the one thing that I always try to do is to look at, how am I feeling? You know how you're feeling. If hopefully everybody's taking time to pause and say, how am I feeling today? How am I feeling this week? How am I feeling this year? And if you're feeling like, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. And how do you know if you're comfortable? You don't have to prep for meetings. If you never have to prep for meetings and people could wake you up in the middle of your sleep and you could be on point, you're probably comfortable, probably not stretching, right? So if you find that you've kind of gone into a group and you're really, really good on your B and C game. When we say B and C game, that means that, you know, even when you're not maybe hitting on all cylinders or doing your best, you're still like just blowing it out of the park. You might want to think about if I'm comfortable or not. I always have been told that if you are uncomfortable, that means you're learning something. If you are in your comfort zone, that means you're probably not learning a lot. Right? So we've all had situations that maybe didn't go the way we wanted, and all of a sudden you're like super uncomfortable, and you learn from that. If you're finding that you're uncomfortable most of the time, you're probably learning all the time. If you're finding, again, that you're kind of in that comfort zone and things are status quo and you know, you don't have that flow and that fire and you're not energized, likely you're still in your comfort zone. So what do I do to get out of my comfort zone? I am a crazy person, and I always set these just insanely bold goals of things that I want to accomplish. I'll give you an example. I was speaking with a customer one day and he was like, yeah, Lilah, I'm a mountain climber and I've done this and I've done that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro. And I was like, if you can climb Kilimanjaro, I can climb Kilimanjaro. And he's like, no, you might want to just, I don't know, train first. Not that straightforward. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just as fit as you. I can totally do it. And he's like, I don't know, maybe do some research, get some data points. Anyway, long story made short, I decided that I'm going to go climb Kilimanjaro. Now, I am a city girl. I like to say I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I'm a city girl. So going to Lincoln Park Zoo is not the same, right? And so as being out in like the wilderness. So I decided that I'm going to, you know, climb Kilimanjaro. I'm going to do the research. I'm going to find a guide. And I'm going to do it. Now, granted, I had never slept outside in a tent before. And when you climb Kilimanjaro, it's like 7 days of sleeping in a tent with no bathroom. There's no like recreation center that high up, right? So you just got to do the best you can. So didn't start off with doing some local camping. Didn't do any of that.
Wait,
because what? I was so overconfident that I'd be okay. Oh my gosh, what a terrible idea. So we get out there. I sign up. I get all the gear. I get out there, and you talk about a fish out of water. Oh my goodness, Crystal, it was tough. But I made it through. I did train for it for about 6 months before I went. And it was the last night before we were going to summit. And we were at 15,000 feet above sea level, and we're going to climb to 20. And I will tell you, the air is thin, and it's hard to breathe, and you see people who are being helicopters come to take people off the top because their brains start to swell. And so we're in our little tent huddling, you know, having our last supper. And there's people outside who are like super fit and whatever else. And they are being like helivaced off the mountain. And I will tell you, I was like, I can't watch. I can't believe I did all this. I've gone through all this discomfort. And now I'm not going to summit. And it was like just hours before we were supposed to start our trek up to the top. And man, you talk about uncomfortable. Man, I was just like, I started to cry. I just started to cry, and the tears froze. And so I was able to get over that huge barrier and talk myself out of it and get my clothes on and just look at the steps right in front of me. Right. I just said, let me just I'm not going to look up because looking up is so intimidating. So you're just like, let me just look right in front of me right here. Now that worked until the guy in front of me fell. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, you know, throw me a bone here. Needless to say, made the trek to the top, summited, took the picture. and then decided I was going to sit down and talk to God. Right? I was like, I think I'll sit down and talk to God. It seems like a good time for that. And the guide was like, so you're not going to talk to God. The reason why you want to talk to God is because your brain is swollen. Yeah, we have to get off, right? And we ended up coming down, and it was a wonderful celebration. But I tried to, that was a very long story because today's about stories. I try to have big, bold goals like that. And even though I don't know all of the pieces of how it's going to come together, I'm going to shoot for it. And that keeps me energized. That keeps me going. And so that's how I try to challenge myself to get out of my comfort zone.
Whew. I would have just gone with camping outside, phase 1. Like, that's not how I want to challenge myself.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Dan, you had a question, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I think, first of all, great. Really enjoyed the presentation today. Thought you did a great job. But one question I had was, oftentimes in today's business world, we're pressed for time, right? What are some tips that you can give our audience to come up with stories where maybe they don't have a lot of time to kind of formulate them? They need to get them out quickly when, sort of time is of the essence. What would you say are some tips that maybe you've had or experienced in that realm?
So time management is a talk in and of itself, as you can imagine, right?
Sure.
One might say, let's look at the root cause of why you don't have enough time, right? But let's just assume that none of those variables are things that we can really deal with. And inevitably, especially when somebody's trying to hurry up and get something done, or maybe it's budgeting season, or there's some kind of a natural escalation point that you're coming towards, and you've got to be fast, right? Yeah. I'm a huge fan of collaborate. Do not take it all on yourself. Understand, if I only have 5 days before this is due, what can we land that's going to have the most impact? Who can I partner with? Take a look at the vendors that you work with and the people who can be a part of building that story with you. What part could you delegate to them? And if you're the kind of person who says, I can't delegate anything, I must do it all myself, that's another talk as well. I question on how impactful of a leader you're going to be. Leaders don't hold all of the tasks. They delegate them to their teams. And oftentimes they get a better result than if they held it themselves. That doesn't mean the leader doesn't check it and sign off on it, but you should be able to trust your vendor relationships. Hopefully those are trusted advisors that you're working with. You should be able to trust people on your team to manage the pieces of that so that as a whole you come together and have a collective story. If you're the only one telling the story, you're probably not going to be successful. Remember, I talked about how you need to have feedback and engagement and stakeholder alignment. If you find that, honestly, Lilah and Dan, I don't have any of that. This stuff is due tomorrow. And to be honest, I don't have a story. I'm not going to get a story. And I don't have the stakeholders. If you have the opportunity to pause and push the meeting. Oftentimes I see people who present things and I'm like, why did you do that? Like, well, we're in a rush. You should have postponed the meeting. Postpone the meeting and live to fight another day, because people will judge you, unfortunately. And I hate to say judge, but people judge you and they'll say, oh, okay, this person doesn't have a good handle on their business. Not only am I not going to take their point of view, but I'm not even going to give them time in my calendar again. Sometimes it takes a long time to get a stakeholder and board meeting, or a meeting with the CEO, or a meeting with whoever it is that's going to be a part of these stakeholders. Postpone it. It would be better to postpone it and come at it with something that you can have conviction in versus doing a half-hearted job trying to meet a deadline. A good example of that is, have you ever been in a presentation where people start the presentation, hopefully nobody did this today, I've got all these slides and I'd love to take answers and questions, but I just got all these slides. I got to get through all these slides. And you're just like, why do you have to get through all the slides? Or do you have is somebody going to pay you by slide? Or like, what is that? Right? Why are you doing that? And they're in this huge time crunch and it's not fun to listen to them. Nobody enjoys it. So what is the goal? Is the goal to get the project done? And is the goal to get your idea across the line? Or is it simply to get through all the slides? If it's just hey, I got to check a box, I don't care what happens. Then I would say don't be in that job unless that's just what jazzes you. Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid to push back and postpone the meeting and get the help that you need. Find people who you can delegate some of the tasks to so that you can have a better and cohesive story.
Perfect. No, that's great. That's perfect.
I love that. And thanks so much, Lilah, for just being here. It actually feeds in perfectly to our next session called Making Everyone Leaders, New Approaches to Scaling Desired Behaviors Throughout an Organization with Al Adamson and Sonia Lucina. They will be doing that in just about 5 minutes. So thank you so much, Lilah. We were so grateful that you were here and speaking with us, and just have a wonderful day.
I plan to. Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Bye, guys.